Welcome to Hades by Design. In roguelite games like this, if you want to keep your player playing for dozens of hours, having a solid variety of playstyles is critical. The 6 basic weapons in Hades are a shining example of how to approach playstyles right. In today's episode, we're going to examine the raw movesets of these weapons and show exactly how they vary up gameplay in meaningful ways. Out of Zagreus' 3 types of attacks, 2 of them are directly tied to the weapon you're using. These are your normal attack and special attack, to be specific. Different weapons heavily influence how you approach combat in Hades, even if the skeleton for gameplay remains the same. Since Hades is a roguelite game, having multiple playstyles to choose from is very important. You'll be playing through the same content for many hours, even if it is somewhat randomized. If a roguelite developer isn't careful, their game could easily end up being boring after just 1 or 2 hours of playtime. Giving the player a variety of playstyles to change up their approach to combat is critical for keeping the game fun in the long run. Having a variety of playstyles to choose from is common in roguelite games, but many of them offer very little real variety. Most playstyles in these games aren't all that different from each other, outside of just changing up how the player character's stats are, like health and attack speed. Meanwhile, the weapons in Hades change up your entire moveset, making for meaningful variety in gameplay. I'm going to go through each weapon and explain how they provide this meaningful variety. But before we start, I'd like to give a few disclaimers. Disclaimer 1. All weapons have a dash attack. This dash attack tends to be a sped up and weaker version of the weapon's normal attack. These are great for bridging the time between dodging and attacking, which helps keep the momentum and fluidity in fights going. For the sake of saving both you and myself some time, I won't be covering every weapon's dash attack, unless I believe it's important to how that specific weapon plays. The same goes for other smaller nuances a weapon might have, like its exact damage numbers or cooldown times. Disclaimer 2. I'm going to be covering the raw movesets of each weapon in this episode. In other words, I'm not going to cover the upgrades that change these weapons in major ways, whether that be boons, hammers, weapon aspects, or anything else. If we included these in this episode, the information I'd be presenting wouldn't be very digestible, and we'd be here all day. With those disclaimers out of the way, we can finally start getting into the meat of the episode, the weapons themselves. We'll be covering these in the order you're most likely going to be unlocking them in. The Stygian Blade, the Heart-Seeking Bow, the Shield of Chaos, the Eternal Spear, the Twin Fists of Malphon, and the Adamant Rail. Let's get started. The weapon you start out with is Stygius, also known as the Stygian Blade. The normal attack is a simple 3-hit combo, while the special attack sends out an area of effect shockwave. All in all, the Stygian Blade is a very straightforward and well-balanced weapon, which is all you can ask for in a starting weapon. After all, you don't want to alienate new players by filling their moveset with polarizing strengths and weaknesses. Now, let's cover the normal combo. The normal combo is performed by chaining 3 attacks together: a strike, a chop, and a thrust. I don't have much to say about the first 2 moves in this combo, but I really want to get into the nitty-gritty of the final move, the thrust. There's a longer delay before the thrust than before your first and second attacks. This long delay makes the player expect something heavy and powerful is coming, and sure enough, the thrust delivers on this perfectly. The thrust attack has a very strong knockback, meaning it'll send enemies flying backwards into walls at high speeds. This also means that they'll take some pretty heavy wall slam damage when hitting the wall, which is probably going to kill them. The third hit in the combo doesn't do much more damage than the first or the second hits, but the massive wall slam damage makes it feel like it does. It delivers on the expectation that the final hit in a combo should be stronger and more powerful than the rest. Not only that, but it also integrates the environment into the Stygian Blade's gameplay loop. It teaches you to think twice about how you position yourself when starting a combo. You'll want to line yourself up with an enemy such that they'll get slammed into a wall when you dish out a combo. Moreover, there's another facet to the final thrust in this combo. It slides Zagreus forward, just by a tiny little bit. This might not seem important, but it is. Thanks both to this slide and to the thrust attack's knockback, you're probably going to find yourself too far away from any enemies to start up another combo. This pushes players to be constantly aware of their positioning and to consider what moves they should follow up with instead of just mindlessly mashing the attack button. All of this focus on the final thrust in the combo brings me to a very simple point. The Stygian Blade's normal attack combo is a really masterful way at keeping combat both simple and dynamic at the same time. It's easy for new players to follow and understand, but not to the point of creating a flat-out boring combat loop. Now that we've covered the normal attack for Stygius, we can talk about its special attack, Nova Smash. When you activate this, Zagreus will stop moving and take a brief second to wind up an attack, exposing himself to potential damage for a bit. This risk pays off once the attack actually lands, creating a shockwave around himself, dealing a chunky 50 damage to any enemy caught in the area of effect. Although the Stygian Blade's normal combo is great for focusing on individual enemies and small groups of enemies, it isn't good for attacking larger clusters of enemies. The Nova Smash special attack covers for this weakness as it allows for more solid crowd control. If you're a clever player, you can even figure out how to cancel out the risk of being vulnerable while activating this attack. If you press the special attack button and immediately dash, you'll have the dash's invincibility frames while the attack charges up. By the time your dash ends, the special attack will already be charged and it'll instantly fire. Once again, the Stygian Blade rewards good positioning. This type of technical depth is always a great way to reward players who put a bit more thought and effort into how they play the game. All in all, I would say that the Stygian Blade is an excellent weapon. It's well balanced and straightforward, having both a normal attack and a special attack that cover for each other's weaknesses. On top of this, the moveset pushes you to play more dynamically thanks to its technical depth. You're encouraged to consider your positioning more in a fight this way. The second weapon on our list to cover is Coronacht, the Heart-Seeking Bow. It puts more emphasis on ranged attacks, as you would expect from a bow. However, I don't think it's a good weapon, and I'll explain why in a bit. At the very least, the bow's moveset is pretty straightforward. Your normal attack is an arrow that can be charged, while your special attack shoots out a volley of weaker arrows. You'll have to hold down the normal attack button to knock an arrow, charging up its damage and range. Once the charge maxes out, the bow will flash for a split second. If you let go of the arrow at this very moment, you'll land a power shot, which rewards you with a bit of bonus damage. The timing for this is actually extremely precise, making it harder to pull off. You'll be locked in place while you charge an arrow, which isn't great since it takes a while to fully charge. Enemies have a good amount of time to move towards you and send attacks your way while you're charging like this. You can release the arrow early to dodge, but that'll cripple your damage per second output. In a lot of fights, especially in the latter half of a run, standing around for a long time to charge up an arrow is going to get you hurt. This ends up making fights feel very clunky since you're constantly just going to be looking for a safe opening that doesn't exist so you can charge an arrow. There is a strategy that alleviates this issue, but it doesn't fix it. The bow's dash attack lets you charge up your shots much quicker at the expense of also being weaker. However, you can chain dash attacks to get a rhythm going for power shots, raising your damage per second in the process. You charge a power shot, let go, dodge, and immediately repeat. This gives you more maneuverability in combat, but it still doesn't feel fluid whatsoever. When you're chaining dash attacks, the only thing you can control about your movement is the direction you dodge in. You can't control when you dodge or how far you move. This ends up feeling very stiff and will usually still get you hit in combat. Even though your normal attack's arrow pierces enemies, it'll be hard to line enemies up and still have them be lined up by the time you launch your attack. Overall, this weapon's normal attack is very lacking in fluidity. That brings us to the bow's special attack, Volley Fire. As the name says, this special attack launches a volley of 9 arrows in a wide arc, dealing a measly 10 damage each. This is hardly even decent for dealing with a cluster of enemies, unless you have a lightning or doom boon on your special attack. I found that the volley fire was most useful when you shoot an enemy point blank with it, hitting them with most of the arrows at once. In fact, I found this special attack did more damage per second than the normal attack ever could, which is absolutely absurd. Needless to say, I feel the base moveset for the bow is pretty bad. There are some hammer upgrades and weapon aspects that make this weapon so much more viable and fluid, but as it stands on its own, the bow is neither of those things. The normal attack freezes you in place and it takes way too long to charge, not even rewarding you with that much damage. Oftentimes, I found myself trying to just completely ignore using the normal attack and only resorting to the cast attack and the bow's special attack. The counter-argument to this is that the bow could actually be good for teaching you the fundamentals of combat. This is a weapon that punishes mindless attacks and positioning, unlike the Stygian Blade. Thanks to the bow's slower and more calculated attacks, the player will be forced into learning the basics of combat. They'll be pushed into learning how to position themselves and when to time their attacks, otherwise they won't be able to output much damage. Since the bow's attacks are simple and relatively lengthy, this lets the player focus more on everything else going on in combat. Although this is one way to go about teaching the player how to be good at the game, I don't believe that sacrificing fluidity in combat is the best way to go about it. In my book, the bow's lack of fluid gameplay earns it a spot as the only weapon I would actually consider bad on this list. A lot of the time, you're going to be stuck in very stiff and inflexible positions when trying to attack. If not, you'll probably just be running around way too often just to look for a spot to start charging your attack in. I think if the charge shot did considerably more damage, or it took a faster time to charge up, this weapon would be much more usable than it currently is. Third on our list of weapons is Aegis, the Shield of Chaos. This is a unique weapon in that it actually blocks enemy attacks. As you might guess, it's often a fan favorite of new players for that exact reason. For its normal attack, it has a simple shield bash with decent knockback. For its charge attack, it has a far lunge that blocks damage as you charge it. For its special attack, the shield can be thrown to hit enemies and ricochet off of them and the environment. The normal attack is quite straightforward, as it's just one hit in a wide melee arc that knocks enemies back. While this is decent for wall slams, the knockback also means it's not too reliable for enemies who aren't already close to the wall. You would have to constantly be closing the gap that your knockback creates between you and your enemy, which doesn't make for fluid combat. However, this is by design, since this normal attack isn't the main way you'll be using the shield. Instead, the main function of the shield is its charged attack, which is called the Bull Rush. While you hold down the normal attack button, you'll simultaneously block with your shield while charging up the Bull Rush. Blocking cancels out all damage from virtually all attacks in the game, provided that your shield is actually facing it. There's basically no drawbacks to this, so long as you position yourself so you won't get hit by another attack from behind. You can block for as long as you want, which gives you almost complete control over the pacing of battles. The catch is that you'll eventually have to come out of your block to attack enemies and actually finish up the fight. However, I don't think this is a good idea, since it means the player can drag out battles to the point of becoming bored at how slow it's moving along. You might say that this is the player's own fault, but I disagree. The game gives them the tools to do this, so I wouldn't blame them for simply using the tools that they're given, even if it does lead to a less interesting experience for them. I feel there should be more measures taken to counterbalance the shield, such that it can't be easily abused for permanent invincibility. A simple countermeasure would be to briefly stun the player or to disable the blocking mechanic if they either have the shield deployed for too long or if the shield absorbs too much damage. This would still let players block to a reasonable extent, but discourage them from turtling for the majority of fights. Aside from that, I think that blocking is a good idea for a weapon. Not only that, but once you let go of your block, you activate the Bull Rush. This sends the player flying forward with their shield in front, damaging and knocking back enemies in their path. The Bull Rush is an excellent way to bridge defending and attacking, making for some genuinely excellent fluidity in combat. If you had to manually attack after you stopped blocking, fights would feel a lot clunkier with the shield. Moving on from the Bull Rush, the special attack of the shield is a shield throw. This ricochets off of 2 or 3 walls and enemies, and obviously damages anything it ricochets off of before returning to you. This is a really cool idea for a special attack, but I think it falls short thanks to its drawbacks. Obviously, you can attack with your shield once it's not in your hand, but I don't think this is a bad thing. I feel this is an excellent idea for risk in combat. However, the shield's travel time in the air oftentimes feels pretty slow, making you wait a full 2 or 3 seconds before it comes back to you. Many times, this travel time is out of your control, so there's rarely any rhythm or anticipation for it. This ambiguity creates frustration. On top of this, the shield's ricochet lock-on range when bouncing off of something is shockingly short. This kind of ruins the entire point of having a projectile that ricochets off of enemies, since you could easily just run up to the same enemies and whack them in the face with one attack. I think the worst drawback of the special attack, however, is that it does a measly 15 damage. Honestly, the other drawbacks are bad, but this one makes the special attack just feel pathetic. I believe if the special attack's travel speed, ricochet lock-on range, and damage were all increased, it would be much more viable in second-to-second combat. All in all, I think the shield is a good weapon in spite of its questionable special attack and overly generous blocking. I think the very inclusion of blocking is a very good way to change up your approach to combat. It gives the player a more direct way to respond to enemy attacks instead of just dodging them. It also lets the player control the pacing of combat more this way. As the cherry on top, the Bull Rush's fluid transition from blocking into attacking really brings the weapon together into something both fun and solid to use. Next up on our list is Varatha, the Eternal Spear. This also happens to be my favorite weapon, but probably not for the right reasons. Its moveset is as follows: a long-range jab for its normal attack, a spin attack that you can charge up, and a spear throw as its special attack. As I just said, the normal attack is a long-range jab. Technically, this is a combo, but it's a strange one. There are 3 hits in the combo, but they're all the same attack. The delay before the 3rd hit is very short, making for an unusual rhythm when stringing combos together. I'm not really fond of this combo, mostly because it's boring and unengaging. If you're attacking an individual enemy, there's nothing stopping you from just standing there and jabbing away at the enemy until they die. The combo's delays are so short to the point where you can easily chain stagger an enemy this way. I think a cool way to vary up this combo would be to take a page from the Stygian Blades combo. As I said earlier, the Stygian Blade keeps combat dynamic by forcing you to reposition yourself to close the gap between you and the other enemies after the end of the combo. It'd be cool if the spear combo had a tiny bit of knockback, forcing you to close the distance you're constantly creating between yourself and the enemy. This would make the combo overall just more fun and engaging on the player's end, since as it stands, there's no repercussions for just standing still and spamming it until the enemy dies. Let's move on to the main attraction of the spear, its spin attack. By holding down the normal attack button, you charge the spin attack. When you let it go, you'll release a big circle that damages every enemy inside it. The more you charge the spin attack, the bigger its radius will be, and the more damage it'll do. In fact, the max charge covers a very large area and does a whopping 100 damage. This is the most damage out of any individual attack for the 6 basic weapons. In my opinion, this is completely overpowered, considering that it takes less than a second to fully charge. This is made even worse by the fact that you can actually dash while your spin attack is hitting, which will carry the area of effect circle with you as you move. Although I think this is a really nice idea that rewards clever players, I still think the damage and potentially range of the spear should be toned down. By the way, this is what I meant when I said I like the spear for the wrong reasons. Abusing this dash spin attack is fun, but it makes a joke out of a lot of battles. The spear also has a special attack, which throws the spear as a projectile. Once it lands, you can press the special attack button again to recall it, and it does damage on the way back as well. This is a really cool idea for a special attack, but like the shield, I feel it falls short of its potential. For starters, the spear projectile only does 25 damage, which is the same amount as the first jab in the normal attack combo. Assuming you hit an enemy both by throwing and recalling the spear, that's 50 damage. However, you can't recall the spear until it's done traveling. This isn't a long delay or anything, but it's still noticeable. Obviously, you can't attack while your spear isn't in your hand, so the recalling delay stings just a bit more. On top of that, I feel there's very little incentive to actually use the special attack over the normal jabbing combo. Although the special attack does have a longer range, the spear's jab already has a pretty long range by itself, which I found pretty satisfactory in most situations. The actual act of recalling the spear doesn't feel very fluid unless you're doing it immediately after staggering an enemy with the initial throw. If the enemy moves a tiny bit out of the way, the spear won't hit them on the way back since it's only locked on towards Zagreus. I think it might be a good idea to widen its projectile hitbox, or make it ricochet off of nearby foes on its path back, similar to the shield's special attack. This would also incentivize the action of being able to move somewhere else before recalling the spear. That's not really an important point, but it just feels really cool to do that. Overall, I feel the spear is a good weapon. The range on its normal attack and spin attack makes it a fun weapon to use from a distance, which is both empowering and fun. I do still feel the spin attack's damage is overpowered, especially given how fast the charge takes to max out. The special attack of the spear is a really cool idea that I feel is executed poorly, mostly thanks to its low damage output. We now move on to our second to last weapon, the Twin Fists of Malphon. This is one of the more unique weapons in the game, as it emphasizes a high-risk, high-reward playstyle, but in the form of fast-paced gameplay. Its normal attack is a simple 5-hit punching combo with very short range. The dash attack is a wide hook punch. Your special attack is an uppercut with slightly longer range. The Twin Fists are also special in that they're the only weapon that has a dash attack variant for its special attack, called the Special Upper. This is a faster and lighter form of the special attack. So let's delve in with the normal combo. This is just a volley of 5 punches back to back. Each individual punch deals only 15 damage, but the delay between punches is also pretty low. 5 punches multiplied by 15 damage means churning out 75 damage in a very short period of time. Needless to say, this weapon has a high damage output. That high damage doesn't come without a catch, however. As I said, the normal combo has a very short range, so you'll have to be hugging enemies to actually damage them. Even though your punches do stagger enemies, this is still pretty risky if an enemy has armor or if an enemy manages to get an attack in. After your 5-punch combo ends, there's a brief cooldown before you can start it up again. This is the perfect time to use any of your other moves, especially the Dash Strike. The Dash Strike deals 25 damage quickly, making it an excellent way to chain normal combos together. You have to be careful about using dash strikes at the right moment, however. With the Twin Fists, it's very easy to fall into an adrenaline rush while pummeling enemies. You're going to be tempted into keep chaining your combos with dash strikes, dancing back and forth around the enemy. However, you still need to avoid other attacks on the screen. If you're not mindful and careful about when you dash, you'll get hit. Meanwhile, your special attack is an uppercut that deals 30 damage twice, adding up to 60. It's a bit lengthy compared to your normal attacks, and it locks you in the uppercut animation. This is clearly meant to be used as a finisher move, but I found that the time and maneuverability lost just wasn't worth it. When you're as close to enemies as you will be with this weapon, having maneuverability at all times is extremely important. You can also do a dash upper special attack, which just hits once for a reduced 40 damage. It's an attack with lower commitment than the regular uppercut, since it's faster. Again, I didn't find myself using this that much since I found the regular dash attack superior in terms of maneuverability. I'd say that the Twin Fists are a great weapon. Even if the special attack isn't very useful in my eyes, I think the fast-paced playstyle is both very exciting and very rewarding. It's a basic idea that's executed wonderfully. Our last weapon on this list is Exegryph, the Adamant Rail. This is probably the most unique weapon in the game thanks to a multitude of reasons. One of these reasons is that it's literally just a gun. This isn't historically accurate, but for some reason I feel it just fits in the game. Maybe it's the art direction and the sound design for the rail. Anyways, your normal attack is just shooting bullets, like a gun does. This uses ammo, and you'll be able to reload the rail to replenish it. Your special attack launches a very slow grenade that explodes in a circle as an area of effect attack. Again, your normal attack is just shooting bullets at enemies. The default capacity for the rail is 12 shots, and this is refilled whenever you reload. The rail has a fast fire rate, meaning you can shell out a lot of damage in a short period of time. 12 shots multiplied by 10 base damage is 120 damage. This damage output is counterbalanced with still having to reload the rail, so you won't be able to mindlessly fire at all times. Well, there's actually another way that the damage output is counterbalanced. Your shots don't actually stagger enemies, meaning that they won't flinch when you hit them with bullets. This is made even more dire by the fact that you're locked in place when you're shooting. When using the rail, you'll have to be more mindful of enemy attacks and either dodge out of the way or stop shooting to sidestep an attack. Needless to say, this creates a unique playstyle. For every other weapon, it's safe to rely on your attacks staggering the current enemy you're attacking, but not with the rail. Ironically enough, that means the rail emphasizes having a more defensive mindset when in battle. The actual act of reloading the weapon locks you out from using your normal attack, so you're encouraged to do something else while the rail is reloading. You can dodge, use your special attack, or use your cast attack to optimize damage. Not locking the player out of their other moves when reloading is a great idea. In shooter games, reloading is usually a period of time when you're completely defenseless. However, in Hades, you can pivot on this trope and use it as a chance to capitalize on more damage. Along those lines, the rail is also unique in that its ammo system encourages you to optimize your reload times. If you only reload when your weapon is out of bullets, you'll be caught off guard and most likely punished by enemies for it. However, if you sync up your reloads with times you're not actually attacking enemies, you can optimize your playstyle to be more fluid and calculated. The rail's special attack is a grenade with area of effect damage. The special attack also shows a huge reticle on the ground, showing where the grenade's actually going to land and damage enemies. If you tap the special attack button, the reticle gets thrown out to the current position of the closest enemy that's in front of you. If you hold the special attack button, Zagreus will stop moving and you'll be able to manually aim where you want the grenade to go. A major downside to this special attack is that it has a relatively long travel time, about 1.5 seconds. This is plenty of time for most enemies to simply walk out of the grenade's range. If you manually aim the grenade to account for the moving enemy, you leave yourself vulnerable and also waste precious time that could be spent shooting enemies instead. And for all that hassle, the grenade only does 60 damage. The long travel time and finicky aiming already make this special attack's risk factor very high, and 60 damage is simply not a good payoff for that. On top of this, the grenades also have by far the weirdest feature I've seen in this game. If a grenade hits a wall while it's traveling, it'll reflect off of it and change its course. This feels so awkward and annoying, especially considering that literally nothing else in this game behaves like this. The special attack is already a headache to use, and this small feature just feels like an attempt at trolling the player. I don't think anyone would have minded if the projectile just went through walls, since there are already some attacks in Hades that do this. Regardless, you'll probably still be using your special attack for the sake of optimizing damage, just not that frequently. There are going to be points in fights where you know enemies will still be standing in the range of the grenade by the time it lands. Overall, I think the Adamant Rail is a great weapon. I know that just contradicts what I said about the special attack, but that rating mostly comes from the normal attack. It offers a lot of unique challenges in combat, from having to reload, to not being able to stagger enemies, to not being able to move while shooting. I think using the rail is a fun challenge that rewards the player with high damage output if they can manage to use it properly. We've now covered the raw movesets of all 6 basic weapons in Hades, and we're nearing the end of the video. There are a couple of things I'd like to touch on first before wrapping up though. Making unique playstyles that are fun and balanced is only half the battle in game design. Most people focus on that part alone, and rightfully so. Making a game with multiple solid playstyles is a big feat that's hard to pull off, and I think Hades more or less succeeds at it. The other half of the battle is actually getting players to use these playstyles. Many games make the mistake of giving the player no incentives to experiment with and use all playstyles in the game. In a lot of these cases, most players just find a playstyle that they like and rarely venture outside of that. You and I have both done this many times when playing games. Hades actually addresses this issue with a system called Dark Thirst. Simply put, before each run starts, one random weapon in your arsenal is granted Dark Thirst. If you choose this weapon, all darkness currency that you find in your run will be increased by 20%. This is a decently hefty amount, and it won't take a math expert to realize how much that bonus will pay off. If you go for the random weapon with Dark Thirst every run, you'll be able to essentially progress through the game 20% faster than you normally would. This is totally optional too. In fact, chances are that many players will ignore Dark Thirst and only use 1 or 2 weapons that they're comfortable with for their first hours playing. They're focused on getting as far into the run as possible, and that's fine. However, if the player keeps playing, their priorities might eventually switch to things like getting currencies at a faster rate to progress. Voila, they now care about Dark Thirst. The last thing I wanted to talk about before wrapping up this episode is everything related to weapons that I didn't talk about yet. Boon upgrades, hammer upgrades, and weapon aspects all offer ways to radically change up a weapon's moveset and viabilities. Something that was totally useless can become your main attack in a run this way. There are some features of some weapons that I've made my contempt clear for here, but with just a few specific upgrades, I end up loving those features. I won't be talking about any of those specifics in this episode, since I'd like to not be here for 10 more hours. Anyways, that's all I have to say about the raw movesets of the basic weapons in Hades. This game does an excellent job of offering a variety of good playstyles to help keep the game engaging for a long time. That time becomes much longer when you mix these up with a wide variety of upgrades from boons, hammers, and weapon aspects. The Dark Thirst system also does a good job at nudging players into trying out more than just one or two playstyles that they're comfortable with. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Hades by Design. If you have anything you'd like to add or refute, please leave a comment about it, since there's plenty more to talk about this topic than I discussed here today. I started this video over a few times in an attempt to give each weapon a fair shake, but I know that many people will have a lot of different perspectives on them than I do here. Once again, if you do, feel free to discuss that in the comments. If you want to see more content like this, please leave a like and consider subscribing. This helps support me and lets me know that there's an audience for this type of thing. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a good day.